Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. I've planned a great program for today, but first, a word from our sponsor, locumstory.com. Locumstory.com is a free, unbiased educational resource about locum tenens. It's not an agency. Locum Story answers your questions on their website, podcast, webinars, videos, and they even have a Locums 101 crash course. Learn about locums and get insights from real life physicians, PAs, and NPs at locumstory.com. And now to my guest. Today, I am pleased to welcome Dr. J. Paul Luftman. Dr. Luftman has been a family and sports physician for 25 years. He is also the author of the new book, The Widowmaker's Gift: Balancing Science and Well-Being in Healthcare. Dr. Luftman was prompted to reevaluate his life's priorities after a massive heart attack. The Widowmaker's Gift describes his healing journey and offers practical strategies for physicians and others to achieve wellness. Welcome, Dr. J. Paul Luftman.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Wilner. Appreciate you having me.
Dr. Luftman, thanks for joining me. I recently had a few days of vacation and I read your book and I found it fascinating. It's just published now, right? It's just come out.
Yeah, this is launch week. It's coming out today, and it's in soft copy and ebook, and then hard copy is coming, and probably next week. And then we got an audiobook that I narrated myself. It's launching next week, probably. So,
Oh, congratulations for doing that. I narrated my book, The Locum Life, and that is not an easy thing to do.
no,
So I have a lot of respect for people that narrate their own books. Did how long did that take you?
I think I was. Let's see, it was about 13, almost 14 hours of recording time, including the ups and downs, back and forth, and editing for about almost 7 hours of book time.
Right. That's right. I had to do mine early in the morning before my voice gave out at the end
Right.
of the day.
Yeah.
Well, I think that'll be a fun book to listen to because it's a very personal book, this Widowmaker, and hearing it in your own voice, I think would be very interesting.
Appreciate that.
So,
Yeah.
so why don't you tell us about it? Why write a book? That's a big job.
Yeah, I think I was in this automatic living place that I describe a lot in the book. I was kind of on autopilot in my life, doing a lot of things and teaching and seeing patients and raising a family. And, I think there was suffering going on that wasn't really recognized. I think it was easy for me as a healthcare provider to always look at everyone else's issues and problems and feel for them. And sort of just skirt around my own issues. And it wasn't until I had a near fatal MI, a heart attack, that really opened my eyes to what was happening around me. And then I think in the process of that, obviously I'm narrowing down, a lot of chapters of the book here, but I didn't have to, but I felt in many ways compelled and on a path to understand more about what happened, about my experience. And really there was this incredible sort of intuitive sense that I finally tapped into that said that I think that this suffering was for a reason. And I think I have to tell my story. And I think in telling that story, I'm hoping that it will reach others before they run into similar difficult challenges in whatever shape or form.
So, as background, you're in a traditional practice. You were taking care of patients. You had your family. You were very busy. You had a teaching appointment. You did some, I think you did some sports coaching, as I remember. I mean, you're a busy guy. And it's not unusual for people like that, to have type A, high achievers, American males, to have a heart attack. But why was it that your heart attack was different? That it said, "Gee, something's strange here."
I think that although it may seem like type A, I didn't live my life like that. Yes, I was achieving, but I thought I was doing it with the right sense of balance in many ways. I was taking care of my family. I was trying really hard to do things on the side a little bit, and it kind of just fell apart very suddenly. And I think I didn't fit the paradigm of what you see when we go to see our colleagues who are cardiologists or other heart specialists in terms of traditional risk factors and things that were there that should have put me into this sort of really extreme situation that I wasn't aware of. And it took some investigation to understand, in my case, why a 48-year-old male who had no really traditional risk factors, yes, there was stress, but there was no other real risk factors. And I think this whole stress leading to physical complications thing has been an emerging phenomenon, in terms of the way that traditional Western medicine has looked at disease and ailments. And I felt like, again, it was partly I was being called to talk about that because it is hard to measure, right? It's easy to measure cholesterol or years of smoking or family history, genetics. It's really hard to measure this thing that is stress. And so, I didn't feel like a type A, but clearly I was living like a type A. And I think that I guess there was just something about it that needed to be investigated for me much more in depth and led me along this crazy winding trail.
Now, you did sort of, I guess, discover that you'd had some childhood experiences that, frankly, were pretty nasty, that I guess you'd sort of just kind of buried, I guess, which you felt were responsible for some of this personality trait of trying to help others and neglecting yourself. And
Yeah.
I know in the book you did a lot of self discovery with various therapies. Imposter syndrome, that's something we talk a lot about. Did that affect you?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are affected in medicine by that. I don't think there's any question it was a huge issue for me. And I think it was because my core wasn't built on self-confidence. It was built on doing stuff for others. And it's just, I think in many ways not sustainable. It may be sustainable for some, but I think for a lot of people, it just breaks down. I think that sense of, yeah, I'm doing all this, but I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm not sure I really worked hard enough for it. And, um, it sort of pushes you to these heights of, I'm going to do this and then I'll feel good. And then I'll take care of this, or I'll publish this thing, or I'll get this following, or make this tenure level. That it just it's never enough. And I think it's never enough to calm that voice inside our head that is constantly telling us that, if you just do this a little bit more, you're gonna make it finally, and you'll feel good, and you'll feel peaceful and happy. And I think that was left over from my childhood, and that's why I had to go back and really look at it.
But feeling satisfied it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, very much. I think that it was just never enough to soothe those things that were happening inside. And my life was built on this sense of like what others see as success on paper, right? What is a sort of westernized culture successful life look like for, let's say, a physician or anyone in healthcare? Buy a house, buy a car, have kids, live a happy life, go on vacation once in a while. Sort of this checklist of things that I think most people are striving for, that they think will get them to some place of feeling good about things, let alone sort of raising to higher heights in their career. And if the work isn't done internally, I just think it just you're always going to feel like you're falling short.
So that's that's pretty disappointing, right? After all that work, and you do make those achievements. You were successful in your practice, and teaching was going well, and on the face of it, your life seemed to be working. And then, boom, this heart attack comes out of nowhere, and it's like, well, maybe that's a signal that something isn't right. So is that kind of
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was really it was declaring itself in the midst of the heart attack. Like the heart attack was the wake up sign. And I know a lot of people don't believe in that stuff. And by the way, had a very, I wanted to be very careful in the book talking about spirituality and things because for many people, getting into spirituality and God and religion is extremely polarizing, and it can be just as bad as politics, right, or other things. And I want to stay away from that and trying to stay positive. But I think that there was something that needed to happen to wake me up. And I think we all get wake up calls in different ways, but I think there's more going on that I describe in the book, as you probably recall, around us in our universe that's speaking to us that it's just hard for our sort of like standard five senses to tell. And I sort of related it to that. So as I went in deep into the science and the physics and all of these things, my grounded westernized self was able to sort of say, okay, there actually is not voodoo or magic going on here with the things in the universe that are speaking to us. There's some real good science now to back this up. So I can lean into it a little bit more. Not necessarily a different belief system, but lean into the fact that, yeah, I think this needed to happen for me. Unfortunately, there was too many things happening that weren't waking me up. And yeah, I feel like it did happen for a reason. And, I'm thankful I'm still here, and I'm thankful that I'm able to tell my story, and I hope it helps others.
All right. So post heart attack, and you did a lot of exploration into Western and Eastern sort of philosophies to try and find some truth to the matter. How are you living your life differently today than, say, you would have, 5 years ago before all this happened?
Great question. I mean, I think that we have to be careful not to also build in the piece of the perfectionism of like getting well after something like this, that we had when we were struggling and trying to achieve. So I'm trying to really slow down and live in the moment. And that has a lot of weird connotations for people, and I understand the difficulty of it, but I've learned with these practices to take moments here and there. I'm still busy, I'm doing stuff, I'm working, I'm taking care of my family. I've got a lot of, still challenges abound, but how I approach it is different. And how I approach it, I think, is I'm thankful and I have gratitude that I was able to find this path, and then I'm implementing things here and there. I wouldn't say that I'm sitting and meditating, an hour twice a day, or that I'm going to retreats every other weekend, or, doing these things that are, I think difficult. I think difficult for most people to really fit into their lives. And most people don't want to just run off and be a hermit. And, I'm suffering so much. I need to just go and sit against a wall and meditate all the time. And that's partly why I wrote the book. And hopefully you saw the exercises I put in there are brief enough where I think it's 30 seconds or 1 minute of awareness in the middle of something that can snap. It may not happen immediately, but added up over time, it seems to bring an awareness to us that we're not our thoughts. I like to describe to people this sense of, you're sort of sitting out here for just a brief second, looking and looking at yourself, going, "Oh yeah, that's not me. That's not the core of who I am. It's just how my brain is doing its thing." And little by little, it builds awareness into a sense of wellness. I think that over time leads to just a better way of living, more well-being.
If I remember correctly, there was this great line. It's like, well, if we're not our thoughts, who are we? And then it's like, well, I'm the guy that's listening to my thoughts. I
Yeah.
thought that was great.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that expressed exactly that way, but that resonated for me because
Yeah.
your thoughts feel so much integrate. I mean, that's who you are, right? Are your
No
thoughts? But
question.
no,
Yeah.
you're the one who's listening to your thoughts. I thought that was a nice way to kind of step away from what can be, troubling thoughts at times.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. It sounds like well, you know, so I mentioned I was on vacation. So on the plane, I watched a lot of movies, and one of them was Christopher Robin.
Hmm.
And Christopher Robin is a tale of Winnie the Pooh. But the whole concept is that this poor guy, Christopher Robin, he played with all of his childhood imaginary friends. But as an adult, he gets overwhelmed with work and that, he weekends at the office and his family's becoming more and more distant and his child misses him. And it kind of, you sort of hear some rumblings in the background. It looks like a divorce or separation is in the making. And Winnie the Pooh comes to London to save him as an adult. And so I think this is kind of a universal theme of a lot of us, I think men and women, the people who are the providers for their families, get caught up in the necessity to provide, but sometimes at the expense of, as you say, living in the moment and being together with their family. Would you say that was one of the underlying sort of stresses that led to your divorce?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to go in depth into my own divorce. There's a lot of pieces there. It's too much to talk about, and it didn't work out for a lot of different reasons. But I felt very strongly that um, I just didn't myself, along with other pieces, have the requisite ability to have a balanced relationship with that partner. And I think the stresses are so multifactorial, right? I think that's what we all live with now, and it's even more ubiquitous now than ever with the technology around us and social media and the stressors in our world. I just think it comes back to staying present for little moments of time to be able to actually see what's happening. You talked about, I'll just go back to what you said. You talked about this voice, and I think that until you are in the car and you turn the radio off and you just watch it for 45 seconds and you see what it's telling you. Yeah, I got to go here and I got to stop at this place and oh, I forgot to talk to this person. And when I get to work, I got to this and I'm worried about that patient and my kids this and baseball. That you start to realize, number one, that it's doing it and you're starting to see it for the first time. And then in that awareness comes that place of stepping out and seeing it. Oh, wow, there is an awareness here that's actually seeing the thought. So I'm not those thoughts. And it's really easy to put into words for me right here. It's I think, a lot more nuanced to actually do it. And the experience is not what my words are. And it really, I think, leads to something different and better that can help. You brought the example of my relationship, but relationships, work, stress across the board, because I think when we're stuck in the loop, we just can't see what's really happening around us. And yeah, we're using our intensive, amazing left-sided brains that have been intellectualized and really guiding us. But I think in many ways, there is an intuitive right side that can be brought in, even for the most rigorous scientific of minds. And people like Einstein, and I brought up the Vedic scholars, have proven this over the centuries.
There's been an explosion of physician coaches. And
Yeah,
a lot of them have become coaches because of their own experiences being coached, and they found it was so helpful that they are, I agree with you that the modern stresses are kind of at a level that we're not prepared for.
yeah,
There's been an exponential jump, the 24/7 availability, uh, the onslaught of information, just sifting through it and trying to decide how to manage it can take all day.
no
Well,
question.
now,
It
part of
is.
your part of your exploration into other ways of managing stress and wellness had to do with, I thought this was pretty interesting, with sound. And you've developed something called the saturation of sound. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm excited about this. The book itself is sort of the step one of this venture, and I hope to create a community. I came up with the name, or the name came to me, I would say, in a moment of clarity where I was in a sound bath experience, right? I was in a meditative environment, playing ambient music, watching these sort of beautiful, sort of abstract visual art visuals. I was in a church, and it was just an incredible experience. And I sort of slipped into this state where I could hear people talking around me, but I was kind of a little bit otherworldly. And this name came to me, and I think it was a combination of my years that I describe in the book, how really invigorated I've been, and how much music in general has enlivened my life. Not playing per se, but just taking part and listening. And I was DJing for many years at the radio station in college. So I think it's some combination of those things that, sort of lit a spark in me. And this name came to me, and I thought, I think it's a great, you want to call it metaphor for our current state, right? It has double meaning. I think we are saturated. If you use sound as a proxy for our senses, we are saturated right now with overwhelm, essentially. Just stuff coming in, probably at a rate, that's 100x, maybe 1,000x more than people even just, let's say, 30 years ago. If you look at the statistics, right, and the amount of information coming at us, let alone the senses, sound, sight, and everything else. And so there's an overwhelm with that I think I was wanting to describe, that I have felt. And I think in being saturated in music and sound and frequency, what I did when I went on my journey was I saw that there's a lot of healing to be had there. And So I loved it. It had that double meaning where it can be both. And I hope to tell both sides of the story. Here's the difficulty that we're all having, and can we be in awareness? And here's a way of looking at it above and beyond maybe some of the traditional things that we've been used to.
I did a program actually with Renee Fleming, the opera star, and we talked about music and its healing powers. And this is a sort of a current area of investigation. There's a new book about that with many, many scientific investigations of how music affects the brain and how it can be used to create at least a better sense of wellness and maybe even healing. So, saturation of sound. So, where do we go with that? Are
Yeah.
we listening to certain sounds? Are we making them? What happens?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is create options. I don't think it's a one size fits all for anyone. And there's people who aren't moved by music, but they may be impacted by sound in the right frequency. And they may be impacted by just putting it on for 1 minute when they're in the shower. It could be having it on in their office or while they're working, just sort of in the background, kind of emanating and kind of moving over them in the midst of getting stuff done or responding to an email real quick. I think what I believe and what I'm building is a sense of incorporating it in like little bitty, in itty bitty ways that add up to making a difference. Just like I talked about the sort of mindfulness moments. And so I want to do a speaker series. I want to present the kind of music and sound and quiet contemplation that I speak so much about in the book. So that's a big part of what I'm going to be hopefully building here. And then the other piece is just really, just like you said, just the amount of literature coming out that's relating to how sound impacts us and trying to allow for a build in that community. You have other younger people just entering the field who are saying, yeah, I want to find other ways of looking at this. I think it's ripe for more investigation because it's not just, well, I listen to Verity and my heart rate improves or this. It's uh, like everything else, what's the aliquot? What's the dose that's needed? What's the minimum dose that works? Can I do it if it's 5 minutes, 5 times a week? Is that enough? What type of, not only the frequency, but follow up? Is there a lasting effect from doing it, let's say, for 6 weeks and then sort of falling off? All of the things that traditional medicine has looked at, I think needs to be looked at in these principles too. The difference is in the past, it would have been, let's say, promoted by people who want to talk about alternative lifestyles or alternative living or alternative healing. And now I think a lot more mainstream people are jumping into this because there is literature and there is data to support what we're doing, at least early stage. It may not be, large randomized controlled trials, but you have some really interesting findings that are worth building on. And so I love the fact that we can combine it. I have this chapter in my book, I'm sure you remember, Living in the And. Let's keep doing what we're doing. We're making a lot of progress in a lot of areas. We've really advanced wellness and improved mortality and morbidity. Can we also bring some of these more esoteric principles in the right way, not just with a guru standing up before you saying it works, but really actually testing it and making sure that it's the right thing for the right population and the right way of doing it?
Now, it seems like you're coming out now on the other side of all of this. And are you still seeing patients?
Yeah, I have a part-time practice, patients a little bit. I'm a pro team physician, so I'm taking care of athletes, and I have an administrative role, and I'm doing this. So, I'm still busy, but I do like seeing patients still. I just felt that for me, I needed a little bit better balance, and what I'm doing now kind of works out a little bit better for the situation I'm in. And I think that I want to create something that, especially for the younger generation, I'm around residents and med students and fellows, and I see what they're going through, and I know the challenges. I don't know it personally because I'm not living in that generation, but I'd like to be able to bridge the gap between our generations and start implementing things that are going to work so that they can see patients long term. The other thing I mentioned just to finish this thought, I went to a reunion with my med school friends, and we're on our mid 50s, and most are really burned out, right? I mean, almost everyone is talking about early retirement, and I think whatever. Everyone can have judgments about that, and whether it's good or bad, or there's problems. I mean, we know there's problems in our healthcare system. There's no question. But I think my goal is to just try to add in some of these things in a community way that allow, especially the younger generation, to think that they're not just working towards an early retirement goal, that there's meaning in what they do, and that there's longevity that can be there and actually sustainability because they have the right balance. That's what I'm working towards.
Yeah, well, I think that early retirement for physicians is a national tragedy
Yeah.
because you have people who have invested so much time and energy to become good at what they do as healers, and for them to drop out of the system before they have to retire at 55 instead of 75. I
Yeah.
mean, you've lost 20 years of someone who could contribute in a very positive way. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
No question.
terrible.
No question.
Now, tell me how your learning in the past few years influences your patient encounters now. What do you do differently?
Yeah, I think there's a listening that happens. I think I was always empathic and trying to hear perspective, trying to hear and understand and be an acute listener because I think patients in many ways need that. I mean, I felt like, especially when I was doing traditional family medicine for, over 10 years, uh, there were so many people coming in with all these ailments, but really the underlying issue was they were lonely or they just didn't have anyone to talk to. And their physician often was the one who would listen. And I felt like, people would leave and I'm like, I didn't even do anything, but yet there was a connection made. Maybe I didn't put an order in or give a medication, but there was a connection made that I think really helped people. And I'm trying to take that to the next level with not only understanding, but really, and I talk about this in the book, having the patients advocate for themselves because I think there's a certain sense if we are too much in the realm of God, this person really needs help. I'm going to give this guidance and this guidance. It really disempowers people, even in medicine, right? I mean, we talk about it in other areas of life in terms of people going around getting recommendations for things and not being able to sort of vie and fend for themselves and make decisions. But in medicine, it's just as crucial. There's no doubt that it has to be a partnership for, I think, people to really get better. Otherwise, they just keep feeling like they're in the sick role and you're giving them the information. So I love, a lot of what I found, again, by serendipity was like the talks by Ram Dass, who previously was Richard Alpert at Harvard as a psychologist and saw patients and taught, and then, went on this incredible journey that he went on, to find some spirituality. And he talks about that a lot. He talks about just not taking people's ability to really engage in their own process, but supporting them along the way. And I think it's subtle. I think it's nuanced, but I'm trying to really put that into place when I talk to people now. So yes, recommendations, yes, give some guidance, but I think there's a way of doing it that is, yeah, a little bit more balanced and allows patients to feel like they can have their own agency.
Yeah, I concur with listening, and I'll add that there's this concept the psychiatrists talk about of active listening. You're not just sitting there like a stone, letting the words go by and being patient so the patient can vent. You're really listening for for certain words and certain cues that are going to guide you as to understand what the patient, who may not even be aware of what they're trying to say, but that you should actively be listening to try and figure it out so you can help them. I think that's
Yeah.
great. I think
I think
that's great.
so. And I hope, I mean, as technology, I mean, everyone obviously not everyone, but it's a common trope now to bash on technology and artificial intelligence and all these things. But what I hope is that we can find a better way of sort of, yeah, I would say measuring, understanding that piece of it, right?
Mm.
We can send out surveys to patients about how, did they like their care, and we can measure, did they like the parking, and was the person nice to them at the front desk, and all these things, right? I mean, there's all these measures of what quality care is now. But I think there's something to be said for having some innovation in this space, right? And not necessarily, I mean, maybe it includes compensating physicians differently. I don't know, but prioritizing that in
Mm.
some way that someone or some groups of someone can come up with and really make it an important piece of that experience. that comes out, and whether it could be even on just a email encounter, not even necessarily or a phone encounter. It can be, I think, measured and looked at in a lot of ways, and I hope that there is in this generational shift an emphasis put back on that piece of it for priority. And we'll see what that looks like. I don't know, but I love bringing it up because I think I don't think I'm gonna be the one that figures it out, but I think people will. And the more we talk about it, then it gives others ideas that they can sort of churn through.
All right. Now, I know you've been doing teaching of young physicians and residents for a long time. What would be your, I guess, the essence of your recommendations today for young physicians?
Quiet contemplation. I think it's all over my book. I think it's for the young and for the old, but especially for those who have spent 10 years, right, post undergrad, grinding, spending their entire 20s, essentially, right, as most providers do. Um, just head down, right? And just getting through the work and getting through call night and learning as much as possible to feel like when you come out, like I'm gonna feel like I'm skilled and qualified and have the understanding to be able to take care of another human being in a significant way that I think it breeds some of that sense of just being in loops and being on automaticity because I think the goal driven set is to get to that point, right? I got to
Hmm.
get past fellowship and then I can breathe. But I think the hard work begins after that because as you and I know, it's a long-term grind dealing with patients and their challenges that takes a certain amount of patience. And if we don't understand ourselves, I think the burnout rate, I mean, we haven't really gone in depth into burnout, but I think it contributes tremendously. And so quiet moments that I talk about in the book, little specific small spots here and there that can add up to something. I didn't want to give more homework to people. I didn't want them to feel like they had to go on retreats and do all kinds of things that are just it's not going to fit. And they're not going to listen and they're not going to do it. This had to be something and what I felt like when reading everything and experience everything I did after my heart attack was explaining things in a different way and then implementing things that were actually realistic and people are capable of doing in small, I like aliquots, my word, my westernized medicine word, but little small bits here and there that add up over time so that you don't feel like you have to jump into something that's just another hassle, another burden.
One of the funniest posters I ever saw was in the early days of burnout. There was an advertisement for a 2 day intensive, 10-hour a day relaxation course to cure burnout. And it was like so ironic
Yeah,
that the idea was we're going to really jump in there and get rid of burnout, which is of course was is the whole problem to begin with. So
no
I thought
question.
there was a lot of irony, a complete
Yeah,
failure to understand what was going
yeah.
on.
I like the intent, but probably executed a little bit differently.
Right, great idea. All right,
Yeah.
Dr. Luffman, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. I'm just getting started, so any support would be wonderful. Everything is really linked and tagged in my website. You can go to saturationofsound.com to buy the book. It's on Amazon and other retailers. And I've got all kinds of stuff going on, starting to build on social media. Not much of a following yet, but I'm happy with a slow build and we'll see what happens. Just keep telling my story and hopeful that over time, it will reach people. And I'm open to feedback. I'm open to hearing other stories and incorporating that into what I'm trying to build here. So, I'm excited for the future. Thank you again for the time.
What's the best way for people to contact you?
Yeah, I think the contact page on my website is probably the best way, and it'll come directly to me. I'm answering all those now, and basically happy to take inquiries, work with people, work with groups. Would love to and I'm already planning to go to med schools and nursing schools and talk to groups of therapists and technicians. I really want to reach people throughout medicine. So yeah, I would say the contact page on my website is probably the best place to start, and I'll get back to you.
Dr. J. Paul Luffman, thanks for joining me on The Art of Medicine.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. And now a final thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com. Locumstory.com is a free, unbiased educational resource about locum tenens. It's not an agency. Locum Story exists to answer your questions about the how-tos of locums on their website, podcast, webinars, and videos. They even have a Locums 101 crash course. At locumstory.com, you can discover if locum tenens make sense for you and your career goals. What makes locumstory.com unique is that it's a peer-to-peer platform with real physicians sharing their experiences and stories, both the good and bad, about working locum tenens. Hence the name, Locum Story. Locumstory.com is a self-service tool that you can explore at your own pace with no pressure or obligation. It's completely free. Thanks again to locumstory.com for sponsoring this episode of The Art of Medicine. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is a professor of neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, other group, or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional, financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please follow on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Please share with your friends and subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com